Hey writers, I am Karena Akhavein, and this is Writers Group Recap. This week we talked about the antagonist. Every single story needs a conflict, and that conflict comes from the presence of your antagonist, which is the person or concept that is keeping your main character, your protagonist, away from what they most desire. There are 4 basic types of antagonists, and I'm going to go over each of them so that we can be clear on what we're talking about. Type number 1, the evil villain. This villain is mercurial, they're changing, they're unpredictable, they're scary, they're mean, they're horrible. They are going to be the thing that your character fears most, and they're actually going to inspire fear in your reader as well. How do you keep this character from falling into cliche territory? You make it a little bit more subtle. They may have some qualities to go with all of those flaws. Also, find their why. What motivates them to do all the horrible things that they do? You also want to make sure that you actually show how the villain went from normal person to supervillain. What caused them to go through that process? The second villain type is the guy or gal next door villain. That's what I call them. I know it's a weird name, but this is an otherwise ordinary person that is kind of seen by your main character as more evil because they're standing in between that character and what they want. Your protagonist is going to see this character as way worse than they are. They're really turning them into a real bad guy, even though they're not necessarily that terrible. So you can also have the completely ordinary person who wants the same thing as your character for a different reason and is therefore going to impede their progress. You can also have this character do something uncharacteristic in their search for trying to impede the character from getting what they want. If you give this character enough positive qualities as well as flaws, it's going to be interesting because your reader can kind of sympathize with them as well and is not quite going to know who to root for, and it makes your story really interesting. However, you really need to show the tension all the time between these two. Your third type of antagonist is the powers that be. This is often present in science fiction or young adult novels. Here's the important thing. You really need to find a person that embodies that powers that be. You can't just have this faceless government that's like the bad guy. Think about in Hunger Games, for example, where there's a character who's the president who actually embodies everything that's wrong with the governmental structure that's oppressing our characters. So that is something to keep in mind. Also, in your powers that be, often that government is going to think that they're doing something right. They're going to think that what they're doing is for the good of the people. Okay, your fourth type of antagonist is your own main character. Your own protagonist is their own worst enemy. Like, think of an author who's struggling with writer's block, for example. Like, look at The Shining. That's a great example of a character that is their own worst enemy. You want to feel bad for the character of Jack, but he really is his own worst enemy. And all of the supernatural elements that come into the story are actually a direct result of his writer's block and his battle with himself and his own demons. You can also have other bad guys come in, but they're coming in kind of as a result of your character's main fault. Are you still stuck with your idea of how to create your villain? You can reverse engineer a villain. If you know who your main character is and what they want most, now you can plan a villain who's going to best keep them away from that. Think about real life villains that you've seen, in the news or in fiction or on TV or in your life, and add characteristics to them. Also take something that you are most afraid of and give those characteristics to your villain. And remember the character sheets I talked about last time for your main character. Use those for your villain as well so that you can find their motivation and the interesting traits that make them so subtle. So that's it, you guys. I hope that this is helpful for you. If you have any questions, you can post them down below. And I look forward to seeing you next time for Writing Group Recap.